Most recently, the issue of police officers wearing any type of face covering during any official operation has become contentious. Some accuse the officers of hiding their identity so that they can commit acts of crime, while others state the face coverings are for the safety of the officer and in some instances also their families. In light of this highly publicized topic, Governor Newsom, who is looking to run for a national office in the coming months, pushed to get legislation to ban the use of face coverings by any law enforcement personnel while they are working. In 2025, California passed Senate Bill 627, known as the No Secret Police Act, which prohibits many law enforcement officers, including federal agents acting in California, from covering their faces while working, but the law contains specified exceptions. As stated in SB 627, a law enforcement officer shall not wear a facial covering that conceals or obscures their facial identity in the performance of their duties. Facial covering is broadly defined to include opaque masks, garments, helmets, headgear, or other items that obscure the face, such as balaclavas, tactical masks, gaiters, ski masks, etc. However, the law contains exemptions, and it allows facial coverings under certain conditions. 1. Undercover assignments. Officers engaged in approved undercover work may be exempt. 2. Protective gear necessary to protect faces during tactical operations is permitted. 3. Medical masks. N95 surgical masks or respirators protecting against disease, smoke, gas, or hazardous environmental conditions are allowed. 4. Motorcycle helmets for face protection for environmental or vehicular safety is accommodated. 5. Translucent face shields are allowed if they don't obscure the officer's identity and conform to agency policy. If an officer intentionally violates the law, the officer can be charged with an infractions or with a misdemeanor. Additionally, for officers who commit certain torts, assault, false arrest, false imprisonment, etc., while knowingly violating the masking prohibition, civil damages are prescribed to be at least $10,000. By July 1, 2026, all law enforcement agencies operating in California must adopt and publicly post written policies restricting facial coverings. These policies must limit mask use to defined circumstances and reject generalized safety justification as sufficient cause. If a law enforcement operation in a jurisdiction intends to include officers masking their faces, they must provide advance notice to local agencies allegedly to help avoid confusion with other agencies. Interestingly, the law explicitly attempts to include federal officers operating in California. However, one could assert that the Supremacy Clause in the U.S. Constitution may preempt this law insofar as it constrains federal agents within their federal missions. For instance, some legal commentators warned that federal agents may be shielded from state criminal liability while performing their federal duties, and that states cannot regulate core federal crimes enforcement functions, including border management operations. While face covering by law enforcement is more discussed today, the practice has roots in older tactics of anonymity, undercover work, and special operations. From early policing and detective work, law enforcement agencies have used undercover agents who adopt disguises, change appearances, or otherwise conceal their identity to infiltrate criminal organizations, gather intelligence, or surveil suspects. In such cases, hiding one's identity is a core tradecraft tool. In addition, as policing developed tactical groups such as special weapons and tactics units, riot control teams, and disaster relief, officers sometimes used masks, goggles, balaclavas, or helmets to protect their physical well-being, but also to shield their identity to reduce the potential targeting of individual officers and their families. During times of civil unrest and riot control, some officers adopt protective gear that partially obscures their faces, such as gas masks and full-face shields. The primary purpose of this gear was for the officer's physical safety. Since the 2000s, as policing has incorporated more intelligence-driven or counter-terror operations, there has been a growth in use of tactical gear, face coverings, ballistic masks, and balaclavas in select operations. In some of these law enforcement operations, there was a concern that there may be a lack of accountability if an officer's face was covered. There are several issues to consider in this dynamic involving an officer's face covering. Some of the key matters that need to be addressed are officer safety, public accountability, and legal authority. Due to social media and easy access to information online, Revealing an officer's identity in social media could expose an officer or their families to retaliation, harassment, stalking, doxing, or targeting in social media. Without a doubt, in high-threat operations, anonymity can be protective for officers, especially in undercover or informant-related contexts. From a physical safety perspective, some tactical or crowd control scenarios may require protective face gear to manage chemical agents, projectiles, or dynamic entry operations. Significantly, the present law as written may conflict with federal authority under the Supremacy Clause if applied to federal officers undertaking constitutionally authorized federal functions. Moreover, the statute poorly defines what constitutes facial covering, opaque, identity obscuring, versus permitted protective gear. Given the tension between accountability and officer safety, a balanced approach should achieve the underlying goals while mitigating downsides. Most importantly, regardless of mask use, all officers should be required to display badge numbers, nameplates, unit identifiers in visible locations such as the officer's vest, chest, armbands, and helmet. This would address the issues of accountability and monitoring of any police activity. Also, the department should ensure that the officer's body camera and its video footage is linkable to the officer's badge and unit. These records need to be preserved for a certain time period. Considering the recent legislative changes, there needs to be a balanced framework to the utilization of face covering by police officers. Police agency policies should preserve the principle of accountability when officers wear a face covering. However, the policies should be flexible to accommodate for legitimate high-risk, tactical, or undercover operations. This is David for 10 on Tactics. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. Until next time, be safe.